Hello, Future Tribe. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. On this week's episode, we've got Katie Zink. How are you today, Katie?
I am doing well, Jermaine. Thank you so much. How's it going for you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. You're in the US, is that right?
I am, yes. I am on the west coast of the US in Portland, Oregon.
Nice, nice. So, before we get the ball rolling, give me an idea of what you do. What we're here to talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have launched kind of my signature consulting program in the newest iteration this year, and what that is a consulting program for organizations looking to commit formally or actualize diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So especially where I live in Portland, kind of in the tech scene is where I reside primarily. There is a lot of activity right now of figuring out what that means and how to go about it in a strategic way. So what my program does, it's a 3-month guided track. That's essentially the process of any kind of strategic planning process, where I guide their equity work and help them figure out kind of how the first year will look. So it's for organizations who know they want to commit, they just don't really know how to get started yet.
Okay, so for those who are listening, and for me as well, let's could we sort of simplify like what you do? You've used words like equity, diversity, inclusivity. In sort of layman's terms, what does that
Mhm.
mean? Like, what if
Mhm.
you have the effect that you intend to have? What is the difference that you make?
Mhm. It's a good question. So we're, we were seeing for decades and decades that specifically in the tech industry, it was a white majority, a white
Mhm.
male majority to be more exact. And so there started to be a lot of passion behind diversifying who's working in those fields, in that field, and knowing that skill set and being able to earn a wage that you earn in the tech world. So there have been lots of kind of committees and organizations that are aligning to figure out how to diversify tech talent. There are a lot of different programmings coming around about um, getting high school students ready to enter a career in tech if that's what they
Mhm.
want, or getting them interested in pursuing it, helping them believe that they can do it, and so the goal really is to make sure we don't have just a homogenous white majority anymore. Eventually that's going to take a long time to get there, but there is a lot of, I think, momentum now, and I think even especially now, in the United States, we're really waking up to what racism
Yeah.
has done, and this, what it's actually been doing and is doing. So my work is really to kind of wake people up additionally and figure out how the cultures need to shift in
Mhm.
order for more people to feel like themselves and like they can bring their whole selves to work. Um, it's more about people feeling like they have a voice to enact change, and less of kind of prescriptive top-down leadership, kind of been doing it, doing it as they've been doing it,
Yeah.
kind of rhetoric. It's just more of an inclusive, people just having a sense of belonging and feeling kind of connected. And, the idea is that if people are more engaged and feeling like themselves at work, innovation will soar, productivity will be better. So it really is kind of a holistic way to think about organizational effectiveness in a way that benefits everybody, not
Mhm.
just the same types of people getting opportunities over and over again.
And I guess part of this thought process is that when you make it more accessible for more types of people, so not just the white man, that you would also, I mean, even think about innovation, you'll get a different mindset, different ideas. You naturally sort of opening it up to different races, different backgrounds, different experiences, different genders, and
Mhm.
so on and so forth. So I never thought about it from that angle, because I guess to hit the I guess the hard stuff sort of pretty early on in our conversation. I think traditionally you've sort of people have looked at it as, why are we trying to force this thing that doesn't exist? Like, if this gender or this type of person is predominant in this sector, that there might be a reason for it. And I guess the assumption was that the reason was that it just attracted that specific type of person, versus looking at it from, I guess, what we've sort of touched on, in that maybe we just, the system was just in place to suit that person. So we almost, the system just was selective, not maybe not as obviously as we needed to be, for everyone to sort of be like, okay, I can see why that's a problem, but historically it's just been a very selective system. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's abundantly fair and really astute actually to think about. I have heard, predominantly white males say, well, won't diversity just happen naturally?
Hmm.
Or, and kind of like you said, maybe there is a reason why, men gravitate towards tech, dominant positions. There is a reason why. It's because those jobs and benefiting from that career was a system designed by them. So they designed a system to benefit themselves, where it was just that one perspective. I think
Yeah,
that's absolutely fair to
yeah.
say.
Well,
Yeah.
exactly, and even the outcomes were designed, or the outcomes from receiving those promotions, or getting into those jobs, were set up in such a way that they were attractive to you know a certain type of person,
Hmm.
because let's be honest, you ideally you would do work for more than just the money, and there's a whole lot of other things that you get out of it, and naturally over the years it's just been refined and refined and refined so that those outcomes are desirable, because as an
Hmm.
employer, as an organization, as a company, it's desirable to make those outcomes desirable versus undesirable, right? So I guess,
Hmm.
you're making me think about it more, because I have, over the years, my opinions have changed, and sort of as I've become more educated, it's changed. But I feel like this conversation alone in the last 5 minutes has educated me even further, because I have just looked at it as, why are we trying to force something that hasn't existed or doesn't exist? And that was me a few years ago, before I did enough study and started to understand it. But now I'm understanding it even more. So that's really interesting. But let's quickly rewind and
Hmm.
go back to how you got into this. What led you to this? Because it's not really, no one sort of, um, at least no one I know has sort of said, I want to grow up and get into what you've gotten into. It's usually accounting, doctor, entrepreneur maybe, or YouTuber nowadays. But how did you
Hmm.
end up where you've ended up?
Yeah. Oh, and I didn't think I was going to be doing this either. I was one of those people that really had no idea what to do, where I saw myself going. But what I did know is that I just had to try a lot of things. I wouldn't say that I started off with so much of a growth mindset, as I kind of self-adopted one when I kind of started doing a lot of more internal work. And um, it really started when I found myself in my college years. I started off as a communications student. And I was, I think, one of the lucky ones in that I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But when I started that, found myself right at home, and I really just became enthralled with studying communications. I loved it so much that I was like, okay, well, I love this. I want to keep growing. What else can I expand into? And communications is thought of as kind of a social science. And so I became kind of really intrigued by the social sciences, and found myself taking women and gender studies courses. And that's really when I'll never forget kind of the sensation those courses gave me of, gosh, I just want more people to have this information, what I'm learning. And so I loved it so much that I pursued kind of a double major in communications and women and gender studies.
Hmm.
And I was lucky enough to attend a school that had, fantastic programming and fantastic professors. After that, though, I still was like, well, what am I going to do with this? I loved this. I loved having this education and having these experiences, but I don't feel all necessarily that motivated to just go into the workforce yet. Um, I didn't want to have, when you're in college and when you're kind of younger, you don't think you're going to have a traditional life. You don't think you're going to be the
Yeah.
9 to 5er. I definitely didn't think I would be. But
Hmm.
fast forward about, let's see, maybe 7 years of working in hospitality and just kind of living my 20s and having a lot of fun, I finally decided, okay, I was living in Colorado at the time. And that's, where a lot of, amazing skiing and outdoors, it's just a beautiful part of the country. And I was 20, I want to say 25 or 26. And I, realized, gosh, I feel like it's time for me to start my career path. I don't know what it's going to be, but I know I probably can't find it here. Um, and so I moved to Portland, and I,
Mm.
started off kind of in the hospitality realm here again. And it was different. It was a very I enjoyed it way less, I have to say. Like, I
Right.
was treated very poorly, harassed, when I spoke up for what was going on for me, I would get fired. I would just be treated horribly by management,
So this
definitely
is
by the
within the
customers.
workforce.
This is when I was still working in hospitality.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay. And what sort of hospitality were you working in at this time?
It was food and beverage
Mhm.
mostly,
Mhm.
serving and bartending
Restaurants
in
or
bars and
bars, sort of
restaurants.
stuff? Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
right. So you were sort of, I guess by this stage you had gone through college, got that education, and you were sort of looking at
Mhm.
it going, "Hold on, this isn't right, and this is consistently not right." Is that
Mhm.
is that sort of what you were sort of thinking in your mid-20s?
Mhm. I would say so. Like, I started to notice more patterns and kind of how women in
Mhm.
particular were being treated and the challenges we had in that setting. And then I ended up leaving kind of because of that.
Mm.
Um, so that's when I got into the tech scene. I started having different roles in tech, kind of more sales and marketing type roles.
Right.
Um, and then about 6 years kind of going into that, I additionally just kept noticing just like what it was like to be, a woman in tech, and,
Mhm.
you know, working in an office. And along that whole timeline, I was kind of volunteering at different causes too. I was organizing on a marketing committee for a shelter for domestic violence survivors, and women in the trades. Different organizations that helped women kind of pursue different types of work. I was volunteering as a ski coach for Special Olympics in Oregon here too. So
Mhm.
I've had a degree of exposure to different types of folks and identities and communities, and I just really got a lot out of that. So when the time came, this is now fast forward till about 2016 in our most recent election. Um, that was a popular time, I would say, similar to what's going on in the U.S. now, where it was just very hot button and people were wanting to take the power back into their own hands because of what was going on.
Mhm.
And so you would have seen a lot of different committees and task forces kind of sprout up for diversity inclusion. It kind of like hit the scene
Yeah.
that year, I
Yeah.
would say.
It became sort of the hot topic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because even years before that, it wasn't really even thought of.
Mm.
So around that time is when I got kind of more visibly involved, and volunteered my time to lead committees and help strategize where I was working at the time. And where I was working was a fantastic company. I loved it there. I was there for 4 years, and they really invested in me. And but at the same time, I just flat out felt limited in what I could really accomplish.
As
So
as an employee, you mean sort of
yes.
being sort of part of that machine?
Yeah,
Mhm, mhm.
exactly.
So you felt there was more potential for what Katie can do and sort of the impact that you can make?
For sure. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I would say about 2 years later, I realized like I want to be self-employed. I want to work for
Mhm,
myself and figure that out.
mhm.
So I took a few more years to kind of think about what that would look like, and then decided to launch my consulting service, doing what I do because I
Okay.
loved it so much. And I thought, I know I want to be, driving my own business and running a business. And this is what I care about the most right now. So how can I make that work?
So how long ago was this that you sort of, went out on your own?
It's been recently, actually.
Okay.
I launched my first service in April.
Mhm.
My last day at my company was March 6th
Okay, and
of this
where
year.
where were you, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, the company is called learning.com.
Okay.
They're here in Portland, Oregon, and the headquarters is here. And it's an ed tech company.
Mhm,
So they
mhm.
develop a curriculum to teach students starting in kindergarten all the way to grade 8. tech skills, digital skills to help them, in their lives and in their career paths in school.
Was there website URL learning.com as well?
Yes.
Wow, I imagine that they'd be getting offers all the time to just buy the domain name, let alone the company. I mean,
I
that's
think we should.
amazing.
I think they should consider that because
Yeah.
you would think it'd be really great for SEO. And I worked in the marketing team actually for a short period of time. But it was really hard to differentiate what we actually did
That's
with a
true.
domain like
With such a
learning.com.
generic, yeah, yeah. But you could imagine, any of the big players, if they decided to get into that sort of education space, and iTunes for education, for example, for courses,
Mhm.
someone like Apple would just come along and be like, let me just offer what does $1 billion sound like for learning.com, because I mean, you would have found out yourself that getting a domain name that's available and makes sense and is short is near impossible nowadays. It's a constant struggle for a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah, it was for sure something I had to think on for a while. And I
Yeah.
luckily we see more like .co, I think is
Hmm.
another creative way, which I end up
Yes.
choosing .co for mine.
And it's
Um,
nice and short. So,
yeah.
like your website, katiezink.co, is
Mhm,
really handy because it's your name,
mhm,
and it's .co, so it's nice and short. Like, I mean, it's basically as short as you can get a URL while still, being on brand. So, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
I just turned 32.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually launched my business on my birthday.
Ah, okay. Wow. Happy birthday. So
Thank you.
you launched in April of this year,
Yes.
mid coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, technically mid coronavirus, but I left my job. I was doing it kind of on the side as
Mm-hmm.
consulting. And so I
Mm-hmm.
left my job March 6th to focus on this full time. And everything changed here, at least that next week when
Yeah, yeah.
coronavirus.
So
Yeah.
what's that been like? I mean, what were you envisioning your lead generation to be like? Or did you already
Mhm.
have a few sort of few things in place, a few projects in place as you left, or were you just going to hit the ground running and get clients that next week after leaving?
Mhm. No, it's a good question. And I've gotten this question definitely a lot when I first kind of was honest with people about what I was doing and where I wanted to
Hmm.
go. And that was just an amazing feeling because people were so supportive, but they were like, okay, so do you have clients or how are you going to do
Yeah,
this?
it's all well and
Uh,
good, but how is it going to happen?
yeah. I needed a ton of coaching. I actually worked with two different coaches
Hmm.
before I decided to leave my job. It was a long process to mentally prepare for that. And I actually worked with an Australian coach.
Okay.
I don't know if you know Rachel Cuship, but she is phenomenal. I would
Right.
recommend her highly for anybody looking for marketing, branding,
Hmm.
coaching,
Hmm.
and somebody looking to actually craft a signature service like what I've done. So I started working in her program in January of this year, with the intent that that'd be a 3-month coaching program that I could launch at the end,
Hmm.
and so through my work with her is how I figured out my business development strategy and how I would get leads and my content marketing strategy and all that good stuff. And I made the decision to run with a beta test
Hmm.
plan. So my goal right now is to put the program through beta. Um, and offer kind of a 50% off situation to work with a client, to kind of run through it with me and maybe customize it a little more for them, but they'd really be informing me along the way. I have the program built, but I'm comfortable with the fact that this first year will just be me iterating on the program, building relationships, just networking my ass off basically.
Yeah, yeah. So, so,
And then
so, so you've just touched on a good point about, just sort of facing the fact that the first year might not be your biggest year. It's
Mhm,
sort of that, just laying down the foundation. Did you
mhm.
look at it from a financial point of view? Did you sort of really save up to do this and fund this for at least the next 12 months? Was that sort of a very intentional decision there?
Yes. No, I appreciate that question. It's such a reality. I mean, this was a long con for
Mhm.
sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, a very long con for me. I took a financial freedom course actually.
Mhm.
It must have been maybe a year and a half ago now. I think it was actually last summer. Um, and I learned it was just, I don't know if you pay attention much to the kind of folks that, want to save up so they can retire
Yeah,
by
yeah, the
30 or
FIRE movement.
40.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Financially
yeah,
independent entirely.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. We had some guests who sort of followed that, and yeah, I think they were in their 30s when they left their full-time gigs. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Very cool. So I did a course basically by somebody of that world and really got a lot out of it. And so I was incredibly intentional about saving and I think they call it like FU money or something. That if for people that maybe someday just want to leave and walk away and pivot entirely, they can.
Mhm.
So that helped me. I was, I had a savings rate of, 50% for a while. So
Yeah.
I was lucky in that way. It was, it wasn't easy, but I would call myself kind of a minimalist. And really what I spend money on is, going out to eat in the city and travel. So,
Mhm.
I've been able to, budget from an informed place for a while, which is great. And then back years ago, I had an Airbnb listing. So I was able to kind of side hustle a little bit that way.
Nice. Yeah.
I rented out my place on Airbnb. And sometimes I would just kind of live out of my car or sleep with my partner. He was nice enough to let me crash over at
Yeah,
his
yeah.
place. But um, that was after I had a really bad bike accident.
Mhm.
And so I needed some surgery. And so I was inspired to do that to help pay for it. And then I ended up doing it for 3 more years
Yeah,
um,
wow.
to help me really save up in
Mhm.
preparation for this
I
too.
mean, you just gotta sort of this is what I keep telling people, like, if you need to, make money, there's just ways to do it. There's ways to, balance it out. There's creative things like you've done to just save if that's what's holding you back. Because
Mhm.
I think it's very easy to come up with reasons as to why you can't do what you want to do. It's much harder to actually just take down those obstacles and just go for it. And like you said, it was a long game. Maybe you had to work for someone, or work a job for a bit longer than you were initially hoping to, but at the end of the day, it's just what you got to do to get yourself in a position where now, for the next 12 months you can think about. I think a lot of people like get into this mentality of, I need to get revenue, I need to make money, I need to make money. Yes, you need to make money for a business to become a business. Otherwise, you're just doing something for free. But at the same time, you also need to free yourself from that thought process of, everything I do has to generate money straight away. Because at the end of the day, it's what you're finding out is, yes, you give it a discount because it's not really about the money that you're charging someone. It's about the value that you can provide and the value that you can get in return to craft something that is going to be better, so that at the end of 12 months you have this product that is, or this service that is so finely tuned, because of this free stuff or this half price stuff that you've done, that you can just go out and just blow it up, because it's, you know that you can just rinse and repeat in a nice way, in a good way,
Mhm.
versus just sort of going in with just hope and a prayer that this service that I've sold for someone at full price is going to be what they want. Um, so yeah, it's just what you got to do, I guess.
Mhm. It's true. It's true, and it is really scary. If it's not good to feeling financial strain, has a lot of negative effects. But I found that from a financial budgeting advice perspective, if you have kind of an emergency fund set up, like if you've done the math and figured out, okay, if I didn't have any income for 6 months, what does that mean for me? I found that a lot more comforting. Just to
Yeah,
know that I'll be
definitely.
okay for this amount of time. I can always get, another service industry job. Maybe not now, but something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. I mean, you've
There's
got enough still to
options.
hold you out. And you know,
Mhm,
I hear the people who say that's easy to say. It's much harder to do. When you've got a
mhm,
family X, Y, and Z. But I truly believe, especially in a lot of sort of in the modern world, so to put it, we are we are pushed to make to spend money and to make decisions that we feel like we don't have an option, but really in reality we do. I mean, I remember helping this family for free because they couldn't afford. It was like a $200-300 service that I just did. You know, I just said, you know what, I'll just help you out. And um, they were really financially strapped. But what surprised me when I turned up was that the kid had the latest iPhone. And you know, at that stage, I think it was a 2-year-old Android phone, and I was sort of looking at this whole situation, thinking, you know, not that you need to look at it and go, oh, you know, you've got an iPhone as if you can't afford this service, but you've got to look at it thinking sort of priorities. And I think it's very easy nowadays to be convinced that, you know, I've got to get the new iPhone when it comes out, and therefore not be able to save even $200 or $300 and sort of go, it was only $200-300, but that could really be the difference between, you know, eating for 4 weeks and not. So
Mhm.
it's it's sort of an interesting conversation to have always. I think money is always something that you don't want to talk to people about, but um, it's interesting nonetheless talking about it because it's a reality, right? We can't, you couldn't have sort of said, you know, I don't have to worry about the money. I'm just gonna. That's not how it works. You've got to keep the lights on and you've got to feed yourself.
Mhm.
So it's a very that's why I want to get into this conversation with you and sort of
Mhm.
talk about that side of things as well. So how are you
Mhm.
finding things at the moment? Like what are you doing? What are the strategies that you're sort of employing
In terms of
in terms of sort of getting
financially.
the, well, in terms, sorry, in terms of getting the business sort of going,
Mhm.
especially given the fact that, are you guys still sort of in lockdown, or were you ever in lockdown over there, or?
Yes, we were in lockdown. The order I think came about on March 15th.
Mhm,
That's when businesses all started closing and companies all sent their most companies sent their employees remote,
mhm,
and so people have been working virtually. And we are. It's not as strict as I hear in some other places. We can leave the house. We can take walks around the neighborhood. There's no policing on that, but um, they're just strongly encouraging people to keep things local and to just not gather in groups. So yes, I live here with my partner and his brothers. So there's the four of us. We're kind of like a little happy family,
mhm.
and they all are out of work from COVID.
Right.
They work in
Wow.
the film and media industry, so
Oh,
that stuff's all
yeah.
obviously been put on hold. So
Mhm,
they're home here, and I'm self-starting here. It's been really good. Um, so I think our governor released a plan on this last Friday that businesses could apply for phase 2 of reopening. So in the United States, some places have already reopened.
mhm.
It was kind of a controversial thing, but here in Portland, they've been very kind of meticulous about it, and our numbers are looking pretty encouraging in terms of cases. So it feels like we're coming out to a spot where we can be thoughtful and still keep 6 feet,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just be conscious of who we're around and still practicing the same things we've been told to practice. But you know, protesting has been a thing that people are doing largely in the cities throughout. And in Portland, I know that we've been going to the protests, and
Mhm.
but testing is also available pretty widely here too. So we were able to kind of see, okay, well, I'm showing negative in my test results, so I can at
Yeah.
least know that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So how are you navigating that? The fact that, I mean, was your original plan to really reach out to people, meet them in person, explain to them sort of
Hmm.
how you can help them? Was that part of your plan, or was it always
Hmm.
going to be fairly remote, fairly, you know, heavy on emails and things like that?
Hmm. I am comfortable working virtually, but my plan was to go probably in space with people and
Mhm,
on site for them. And historically, how I've done the work is to meet all together in person as kind of a coalition or committee. So that's what I'm used to. I think that especially when you're doing a workshop or something like that, and face to face in person is always just more powerful.
yeah.
Or at least that's what people are used to. Now I've done everything virtually, virtual networking, having calls, and I really like that. At first, it kind of felt like, oh, we're all here we're kind of, figuring this out together, and the pressure was sort of off.
Hmm.
They were upfront about the fact that they won't be bringing in outside consultants anytime soon. I had a
Yes.
few leads say, maybe we'll bring you in June, and so that was 2 months ago. And
Hmm.
now I'm following back up with them this month. And,
It's not
one of them took
really
my call and wants to have a
okay.
virtual meeting, but was upfront and said, you know, at at the earliest I could see them hiring you wouldn't be until the end of the year or early next. So my goal is just to build as many new connections and, showcase my service as much as I can, and focus on visibility, awareness, just and the market research. So making sure it's just the right offering,
Hmm.
further quantifying getting really exact on my target market and my audience. Right now, I'm kind of in that state where I think my service can help anybody. I need
Yeah.
to really like get more
Find your
specific.
niche, what you enjoy, what you can really
Yeah,
provide that edge and that sort of differentiating factor, right?
for
Um,
sure.
because I mean, not to be sort of rude about it, but I would assume, and I guess it's just a state of thinking. Is it fair to assume that looking at budget cuts and financial stresses that companies are facing, diversity and inclusion is sort of lower down the priority list, unless they've had very specific issues around it. They wouldn't necessarily reach out and um, and sort of chase after that. Is that fair to say?
It is fair to say. I think it's something that practitioners like myself are working to change that narrative and be
Yeah,
seen as a not a nice to have, but a
yeah,
must have.
must have. Yeah.
But I think that, yeah, especially in the pandemic, when things really started to get kind of confusing, and navigating, remote work for many people for the first time, it got backburned, so to speak.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just put on the back burner, deprioritized. I hear a lot of teams completely getting cut. Um,
Yeah.
and that's just a sad reality. I think that, especially executive leaders, maybe they just don't really see why it's a priority. So that's just kind of a narrative that I work on, and my messaging is around that, of why
Mm.
it is. And then, with what's happening here with murders of the Black community and police brutality really surging on the radar right now, it's interesting to see them now realize, oh, we do need to show that we care about this, and
Yeah.
tell what we're doing to address this and to be better, and how we're being anti-racist. So it's interesting, now that it's in fashion again, so to speak. um, they are now acting like they care. And so it's interesting because it does often take a external force for companies to really act on something they
Mhm.
maybe aren't normally doing, whether it's like avoiding a PR nightmare, or, in nonprofits specifically, funders are now asking for it, which is interesting to
Right,
me.
okay. So it's sort of
Mhm.
starting to become, some almost not optional because people I mean, for them, it's more security, right? If they can
Mhm.
guarantee that when they're providing funding that, things are in place to make sure that everyone feels safe and included, that's just
Mhm.
naturally much better. Even though a
Mhm.
company would probably look at it sort of going, we wouldn't spend money on that because we'd rather spend money on product, on development if we were given the option. It's
Mhm.
interesting to see that, as you're suggesting, it's sort of almost an external force. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that,
Mhm.
it's there's segments of that, the different layers of the onion that are understanding the importance of it. And it might not have reached the core yet, but there's layers, above that are picking up on it. And I assume even like boards of directors and things like that are picking up on it as well.
Mhm. Definitely, especially when their markets are even asking for it. For-profit
Mm.
companies, I've been hearing, in the RFP process, um, they ask for it to be demonstrated, and how they're committing to diversity, equity, inclusion in order to win a sale or to win a contract. So it's actually becoming weighted in decisions in many ways.
Yeah, which is
And
amazing.
it's definitely a factor in recruiting too. I mean, this generation of workers and new talent, they're expecting, institutionalized inclusion and for
Mhm.
companies to show it because, millennials and now we're seeing, Gen Z, they were just raised to believe that that's how it should be,
Yeah,
you know?
and they value that, right?
Yes.
I think even sort of my parents' generation would have had the approach of, if it doesn't seem right, you don't want to sort of cut off the hand that is feeding you, and make an issue of it.
Mhm.
Just sort of deal with it and just go with the flow, because the
Mm.
salary is more important. But I think there has definitely been a shift in that sort of thought process of, no, we have a right to feel like we belong, like we're included, like we're respected. And if we don't feel that way, we're going to leave.
Yeah.
Which is putting that power back on the employees rather than the employers. I think it'll be interesting to see sort of what coronavirus does to all this. Obviously, coming out of it, like where the pressures and where the balances shift. But I wanna sort of move along the conversation into content marketing, because you mentioned content marketing, and um, I am a big fan of content marketing. What are you doing in terms of content marketing?
Mhm. Totally. Podcasting is kind of one of my favorite things right now. I have a goal of trying to appear on at least a couple of months and just get used
Mhm.
to that. It's new for me, but I think it's a really cool way to just have a visible conversation with somebody, and I think it's mutually beneficial. And then podcasting has been a great way for me to occupy my time too, and
Mhm.
being stuck at home. So I've been loving that, but I'm a writer too, so I really love just kind of like honing in on my blog strategy. So blogging is another thing I do.
Is that on
Um,
your website? You're blogging
yep,
on your website? Yep, yep.
yeah, yeah. My blog's
Awesome.
on my website. Yep,
Mhm.
and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well, so I publish articles there. But
Yeah.
I blog about biweekly now, and my strategy for the month of June, actually, it's really coming together perfectly. It's all about inclusive leadership, and the journey to inclusive leadership. So my piece I'm working on right now is kind of the journey companies go through before they're ready to fully commit to this work, and kind of mistakes they make, and maybe there's some different intentions or mistakes they're making behind good intentions, I guess I could say. And so I really enjoy that because it just kind of helps me push myself to keep that cutting edge.
Yeah.
And it just gets me really researched and watching what others are doing and learning. So I love that. And then like I said, I'm not at the biggest social media pro, but I am trying to learn. But I really like LinkedIn. I would say that's my number one channel, and it fits perfectly for what I do. And
Yeah, yeah.
um,
I mean, it
yeah.
lets you, like you said, it's just perfect, because it is such a high level thing that you sort of do have to go in at sort of a LinkedIn at a very professional level
Mhm,
to find the right people, because
mhm,
which makes it good for you, I would say, because there are lots of other businesses that it's not so clear cut. They could be on almost any platform, because there's sort of the ideal clientele on any platform, but
mhm,
makes it easier for you that more or less, I would say that LinkedIn is sort of the only place for you in terms of the bigger social platforms at this stage, for you to really
mhm,
be pushing your conversation through. and
mhm.
and it's probably higher level sort of stuff anyway. It's not just the um light read on a Sunday afternoon, I would guess. Is that right?
I don't think it's light at all.
Yeah.
Anything on LinkedIn, I feel like right now, especially, it's pretty heavy content, which is good. It keeps me honest.
Mm.
I have put a lot of pressure on myself to stay very engaged with what's going on right now.
Hmm.
And it just gives me access to amazing thinkers and thought leaders and connections. Like, what's cool is, I mean, it lends itself really well to HR, human resources, and staffing, recruiting, all that stuff. So what I do is such a component of that. It's not exactly that, but I would say that what I do is kind of a lens that HR needs to apply,
Hmm.
and a lot of HR practitioners are kind of like forced upon this work too. It's like dumped on their plate as well. So I look at HR practitioner is just kind of my business partner in this effort. And so what's been cool, especially when I first launched, was when people would connect with me. And I noticed they were always the titles that I wanted. And so that was very affirming to me. And then I would just get in the habit of trying to ask them, if somebody connected with me, ask them, what inspired you to connect with me? Just as
Hmm.
simple as that. And I got the most incredible responses,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
was able to book sales calls off of them. And so it's literal inbound, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was able to demo my service for them, show them around, give them a sense for what working with me would be like. And I got nothing but positive feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, and it
So,
sounds like you've got your target demographic fairly well nailed down. I
mhm,
mean, of course, it's as you refine it and as you sort of understand, as you get sort of your hands dirty, so to speak, it's just going to become even more refined. But it sounds like the business. I would assume the business coaches will really push you to get that target demographic pretty well nailed. Um,
for sure. Yeah. The work I did with my coach, she called them who are your dream clients.
yeah.
So I would totally write, all of my content and craft a strategy around my dream clients, which is kind of, it is kind of hard to do when you're newly starting out. But I know for sure. I mean, I know that my work will require partnering with human resources in an
Hmm.
organization. So that is kind of my top tier who I appeal to. But I want to appeal to CEOs, CFOs, COOs, the executive levels are critical too, because when we start our work together, it does need to come from the top, but
Hmm.
oftentimes it doesn't start at the top.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
because I
it's
mean,
interesting.
often they're the ones they're the ones who arguably feel the least effects of it all because they're in the position of power, and it's sort of the other end that really gets affected by sort of what you're focusing on, um,
Hmm.
which is just when you're not in a position of power, it's how you get treated in those positions, right? It's how you get treated when there's no reason for anyone to treat you. Um, at least from a work perspective, there's no specific reason or benefit in someone treating you well. That's where you would have those negative effects, or feel the negative effects of where the current sort of mindset sits, depending on the organization, of course. Now, let's talk about some mistakes that you've made, or any that come to mind, in your road to where you are today. Are there
Hmm.
any big sort of mistakes that come to mind, things that we can learn something from?
Mm. There will be. I right now I'm being pretty gentle on myself, and if I notice I'm doing something that I need to change, I kind of just view it as that. I try not to hark too much on mistakes or be overly critical. I'm trying to think if there was a mistake that I could
I
that I
mean,
could share though.
not necessarily mistakes. Let's call them moments where you've got to pivot, or moments,
Hmm.
teachable, learnable moments. Any of
Hmm.
those come to mind?
Hmm. I would say the shift to virtual was interesting for me. I was luckily not too far down my path of what my service needed to be in person. I was early enough that I could be very flexible. But I think kind of a lesson I've been learning along this way is, because another piece of my offering will be workshops and me facilitating them. And I've done I've done several in the past, but I feel like here's one. I feel like I always bite off way more than I can chew. Like
Hmm.
I've kind of gone to this zone of like, oh, I can learn anything, I can do anything, I can become an expert in anything. And I'm learning to not backpedal, but just be really careful about that. As an independent consultant, I feel not really any more protection from the world. Like
Hmm.
I when I was working for corporate, I was even kind of hiding behind the job and feeling very like insulated there. And now when you're consulting and you're an entrepreneur and you're just kind of working on your own and managing all these things on your own, I feel very like um, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Just immersed. Very,
Mhm.
it's a very immersive experience. And so I'm learning how to say, okay, am I really an expert in this? Don't oversell. Don't oversell what you can do, because people can see right through that. And I believe myself to be a very confident person, so I can sell myself easily. But I
Yes.
just want to just make sure that it's, where I need to be, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it's a bit of a trap that you can fall into as well, because Google, well, just resources. You can Google is one of them, but resources
Mhm.
are so easily accessible nowadays that you can go down that rabbit hole, come out of it thinking that you're this expert within a
Mhm.
certain area, and then you've got the freedom as an entrepreneur, as your own boss, to then, if you wanted to wake up tomorrow and say, if you spent 40 hours learning about web design, you could probably just say, hey, I can also help you with your websites. And you could convince yourself, especially if you're
Mhm.
self-confident, that hey, yeah, I'm an expert. And just, it can be a trap, because you could just, that sort of this never-ending cycle of, oh, this is this other shiny thing that I'm gonna upskill myself in, and then you'd never let yourself have enough time to really hone in on one thing and become really good at that one thing. Which,
Mhm.
especially at the start, I mean, that's what you got to do. I know, like, I always think to the big companies like Deloitte, for example, who offer so many different services, or even like Microsoft and Apple. At some point they were just one product and or one service, and they got really good at that, and then they funneled back those funds into something else, but they got really good at one thing first. And that's sort of what you're touching on
Mhm.
here, that you shouldn't fall into that trap, especially when you got
Mhm.
time on your hands, and there's not a boss saying this is the box within which you must fit. um,
Yeah.
it's easy to spill everywhere.
Yes, it is. We all know as entrepreneurs, keeping focus is definitely a skill, because yeah, there's so many interesting things going on that I want to consume that. I want to consume that. Oh, I want to incorporate that into my service somehow, or this workshop. And then when I go to deliver it, I say, I maybe don't feel like, oh, am I equipped to really be doing this? I don't know, but that could also just be kind of a perfectionist attribute
Yeah.
too. But
It's
what
tough.
you're talking about, and thinking about content marketing too, this just kind of reminded me of a memory when I realized that I had a great flair for writing, and people started to commend me on my writing. I was like, huh, I'm going to explore that, because I'm seeking more creativity in my work, and this could be a great way to go. And so for a while I had these two kind of skills that I was grappling with. How can I create a signature service or a unique contribution with copywriting and DEI consulting. And so it was this weird thing. And then I realized after a year in marketing, I did not like copywriting actually. I was terrible at it. And then I tried to figure out how I could, sell services, writing web copy and doing all these very specific skills that once I actually accepted a job doing, which seems very maybe counterintuitive. Um, that's another mistake I could share. Really, before you accept a job, really be very detailed on what the job is. It's interesting because you want to go for a lot of things, and then maybe when you are in a place, then you learn kind of what you're not actually that great at.
Mhm.
But what I do love is writing for myself and writing my own kind of content marketing. I think that's kind of a differentiator there.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're writing for yourself, that's different, because when you speak, it's your tone, it's your voice,
Hmm.
it's your vibe. Where, I mean, to be a good copywriter, it's really a different skill set, because you almost need to sound like your client, but then say the right words as your client. So
Hmm.
it's a whole different world. Because I mean, I think about even things like photography. I think nowadays we
Hmm.
just have the tools so easily accessible. I mean, even copywriting, it's one of those things where, I mean, what's the barrier to entry? It's sort of nothing, right?
Hmm.
Uh, if you
Yeah.
got a pen and paper, you're good to go, and those things cost cents these days. But yet there are people who charge. I mean, just recently we were working with someone who charges $100 Australian an hour, and takes about 3 hours to write one web page of copy. So um, that they're yet able to sell themselves at such a high level, because that's just a reminder to me, at least, that it seems simple, but really it takes a lot of sort of experience and a lot of perfecting to get it to a stage where you can sell it to someone. Awesome. So where can people find out more about you?
Yeah. So my website, katiezink.co. Um, a really great way to stay current with my work is to sign on for my newsletter. Um, it's called the Confidant Connection, and that's where I'll curate all of my all the pieces I'm writing. If I've made an appearance on a podcast or something like that, I kind of write that in, and then I've got a kind of a theme going
Hmm.
monthly.
Hmm.
So that's a great way to stay current with kind of how I work and what I'm writing about. Um, and then on LinkedIn, I'm very active there, so you can find me and hit me up on LinkedIn.
Awesome. We'll include all those links in the description as usual, so that anyone who's listening can connect with Katie and sign up to the newsletter. You ready for the top 12?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, awesome. So let's
Yeah.
get the ball rolling with top 3 books or podcasts that you recommend.
Yes. So I'll go for books. Top three. One that I can't promote this enough. It's called So You Want to Talk About Race, and it's about a Seattle-based, or it's by a Seattle-based author called her name is Ijeoma Uluo. And if you are interested in learning more about having discussions about race and kind of the importance of being anti-racist, this book is a great place to go. Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott, also Seattle-based. This is just so important for people that are managing teams or managing or leading organizations about how to have like fierce conversations and effective
Hmm.
communication. Um, and randomly, I came across this other one. It's called Unfuck Your Brain,
Hmm.
and it's all about kind of managing trauma, grief, and coping, and just like all the things that our brain is working through on a regular basis that we may not fully understand. I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, wow. That's a very solid start, I must say.
Yeah.
Especially the first two really, really sort of made me go, "Hey, I've got to find those." I'm probably going to try and look for audiobooks though, because
Hmm.
I find it much. Well, I can just smash through it, right? I can listen
Hmm.
to. I'm one of those people who can listen to things while working and still get both done quite effectively. So,
Hmm.
I can sort of really rack up the hours listening to content. So
Hmm.
the first thing I'm gonna do is now look for those first two books, because they're very relevant right now as well. Just from from a professional point of view, as well as just looking at what's going on out there, and hearing other people's sort of points of view on this is really crucial too. So fantastic. Next one, top 3
Hmm.
software or tools you can't live without.
I would say LinkedIn is kind of number one for me right now. I'm getting the most kind of ROI, if you will, with LinkedIn. Asana is, I use the free version, but it's my go-to project management tool.
Mhm.
And the last one is a tie between ConvertKit and Squarespace. Um, I My website is hosted on Squarespace, and I'm just so illiterate when it comes to website building. So that was great for me. But ConvertKit, I'm kind of geeking out about. They have an amazing content marketing programming. Their webinars they put out, their trainings, their workshops are really, really solid. And as a brand new entrepreneur building my contact list, I would recommend it as a tool for sure.
And I
I need
assume
to,
your newsletters are powered by ConvertKit as well?
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Awesome. Yeah, no, ConvertKit's an awesome tool. So is Squarespace for someone who's just starting off and
Hmm.
wanting to get a web presence that looks nice at an affordable sort of price. Yeah, that's again very very solid recommendations. I've used Asana over the years. We use something a bit more complex now with
Hmm.
a lot more customizations, but Asana again, especially at their free tier. From memory, Asana's free tier is quite generous and is enough
Mm.
for at least a solopreneur. Uh, Definitely. So awesome.
Hmm.
Top 3 mantras you try to live by.
So the first one, this is actually my marketing coach, hers that I have been adopting a lot right now is done over perfect.
Hmm.
Um, I kind of mentioned perfectionism earlier, but it's something that I'm aware of now that I maybe am falling into a perfectionism groove. And so I know when I've spent enough time on something, starting to get comfortable. Okay, this is done. I don't need to do any more tweaks or tests. Like, it's done, and walk away. So done over perfect is a really good one. Another one that I like is to put your mask on before helping others, because self-preservation is key.
Hmm.
Um, you know, it's not to be selfish, but it's just self-preservation, I think is so important. We have to take care of ourselves in order to bring our whole selves into our work and do good work.
And continue to be there, day after day, to continue to do that work as well. I think
Mhm.
just the other day I was watching an episode of Shark Tank, and it was a social enterprise, and their whole thing was, they want this social mission to be realized. But what the sharks kept saying were, yes, but it is about the money, even though you're saying it's about the social mission, because you've got to be here. The world's not going to be a better place if you don't exist tomorrow. At least your impact on the world is not going to be felt if you're not here tomorrow as a business. So
Mhm.
yeah, self-preservation goes hand in hand with that. So I love
Mhm.
that. No one's ever actually said that one before.
Really?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true, and I think that we're all kind of, like, having to digest a lot right now, so, don't forget to take care of yourself.
Yeah. And what's the third?
The third is a simple one, it's just speak up. Speak up. In my work, I talk about, speak up culture, and I think there's a big difference in calling out and calling in. I don't
Okay.
know if you've ever kind of heard that distinction,
No.
but I think it's really important, because the difference between calling in is it's always leading with heart and kindness. So, a lot of us are maybe having difficult, fierce conversations right now. Calling people out, I don't find to be as effective in the long run. Whereas calling in is just a way more compassionate, heart-centered way to communicate with people.
Right. So how would that in practice? Let's say someone at work is really phoning it in, taking credit for the work that you're doing. I mean, one
Mhm,
option is to just put them on blast, right? Just go to the
mhm,
bosses and be like, listen, this guy or this girl, they're just taking all the credit for all the work. They're really not showing up.
mhm,
What's the calling in sort of approach to that, would you say?
mhm. Yeah. I'm just kind of like flipping to some notes, because I've been writing a lot about this.
Hmm.
And I kind of have like tips that I like to share for how to speak up kind of in the moment. And the first really is just to think about the mindset, and just to remember that just because you're the loudest person in the room, or somebody else is the loudest person in the room, it doesn't mean that they're the only ones with good ideas. Um, so challenging groupthink is just really, really important, and allowing space for to share the air. Basically, that's one of my agreements I always share with my clients, is share the air. Some people are more comfortable talking and talking and hearing themselves talk, and I'm an introvert. I'm somebody who'd rather listen and stay quiet.
Hmm.
And so those people kind of have to push themselves to speak up a little bit more. And so when you're kind of like maybe up against a situation, maybe it's like a situation where somebody is just, there's been a microaggression, somebody's kind of insulted somebody, or there's been, somebody's just kind of been targeted for something. Um, there are some things you can definitely do, and I talk a lot about this, and my content is interrupting that bias, or interrupting that with things like humor. If that's in your wheelhouse and it's appropriate, and it's with led with kindness, like, it's totally a great strategy to like just break up the pattern with some humor and get
Hmm.
people laughing, and maybe like just interrupt and make them think about a comment that wasn't great. Or because really, it's so important to be represented, like in a project, in a meeting, having your voice heard. So for people that just aren't that comfortable speaking up, it's just a good habit to get into. Another skill is kind of that I recommend is honing in on your critical thinking skills, because that'll just build your confidence naturally. I think when we were in school, critical thinking was just part of the pedagogy, and it was part of our
Hmm.
curriculum. But I don't know if adults practice it as much as they could now. So I like to, advise people to just take those surveys. When you get like marketing surveys, just take them. Just like practice those critical thinking skills and make it
Yeah.
a habit. And then my personal favorite is actually like just take the day. It's actually really awkward and hard and difficult to speak up in the moment, at least for me sometimes. And
Mhm.
so I think take the day, journal it out, sleep on it. And then if there's something that you wanted to speak up about, go privately and speak with that person or your manager or your client, at another time.
Mhm.
Especially if you're in a situation where you're managing up. I find that to be really effective too.
Yeah, rather than sort of, yeah, sometimes the trap you can fall in there when you sort of tell someone to stop being quiet, speak up, is that then it can
Mhm.
sort of things can be done in the heat of the moment without real critical thinking, and then you end
Mhm.
up being louder than you might traditionally be, putting yourself out of your comfort zone to then not convey your message, and all in all just end up in a situation where you were probably better off just to shut up. Right, but if you take all those tips as a whole, I think yeah, very good advice, because you're basically going through all that first rather than just speaking up for no reason. So yeah, it's sort
Mhm.
of the advice that I think, um, you take one of those things doesn't quite work,
Mhm.
but you take the whole, and it's really much greater than the sum of its parts. So
Mhm.
fantastic. Top three people you follow and why?
So let's see here. So I think right now I'm following a lot of peer practitioners in the space that I work, and so I'd be happy to name off a few that do similar work as me, but come from a different perspective and maybe bring other, they do bring other contributions. One is Lily Zhang. Lily is a DEI practitioner in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she's published kind of all over the place. She writes for Harvard Business Review, and
Hmm.
I kind of wake up every day to something amazing that Lily has posted on LinkedIn. She's just stellar. Um, Other than that, the author that I mentioned before, I bet you can find her on audio, Ijeoma Oluo. Um, I do use Instagram, not for business, but for personal. And I love everything she puts out when she does her lives or, her excerpts. Like it's just really informs a lot of my kind of my thinking.
Hmm.
And then a third, um, oh, can I? Okay, totally random, nothing to do with work, but Benny Drama. Do you know Benny Drama?
No,
Benita
tell me
Skinner.
more.
Okay, you need to be following him. He's so hilarious. I think he's a New York-based content creator, and he's an actor. He has like a stage production, and he does like the most flawless like impersonations you'll ever see of just like Billie Eilish or the
Hmm.
Kardashians or whoever is like kind of in vogue right now. And he's just is so funny, just the funniest videos. He's mostly videos, but posts, and he's always kind of like in drag or in some sort of costume, and he's like very good though too, like
Yeah,
super
yeah.
skilled acting. Yeah.
Awesome. Love it. That's a really nice mix of wholesome and, wholesome but in a different way.
Yeah.
Awesome, Katie. I mean, as always, Future Tribe, all links from this episode is going to be available in the description, including links to all the software and books and people that we've talked about in this episode. So, any parting words, Katie?
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. Yeah, great
I'm
way to spend the
glad.
afternoon.
I'm glad you think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was great to connect, and it was great to chat. And I might be shooting you an email once I've again just thought about our conversations. And it's like I said, it sort of inclusion and equality and diversity is an area that I'm you know trying to upskill myself in, and it's
Mhm.
something that I have a very very interesting relationship with, because being in
Mhm.
Australia, we moved to Australia. um I'm sort of a brown male with a
Mhm.
beard. I have an interesting relationship with it, because
Mhm.
I choose to think that people come from a place of goodness, and not
Mhm.
racism and so on and so forth. But there's just things that I like. just small things like, ordering fried rice and being told, oh, it's got bacon in it,
Mm,
are you okay with that?
mhm,
Assuming that I'm Muslim, for example. Just
mm,
even subtle things like that. So it's always been this thing where I'm like, I sucked it up, you've got to all suck it up as well, and just deal with it and sort of navigate through it. And but on the other hand, this conversation in particular has sort of made me think about it more from the other side of, maybe you just don't have to put up with it. There is
mm.
there is systematic things that have happened over the years, and just systematic things that have been um, set up in such a way that it benefits a certain group, or it has attributes that attract a certain group. And
Mhm,
we can change that, because those are just established at a certain point by
mhm.
people, and that just means that they can be changed by people, and that there's a role that we
Yes.
can play in all of that as well.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And when I was thinking of the name for my company, you just described it basically. It's called Social Construct
Hmm.
Consulting because everything that we are experiencing is that, and so it can be changed and
Yeah,
improved upon. And yeah, absolutely. Well, I would love to share. I could talk about this stuff all day, so I would be happy to share more stuff if you have questions. I can
sure.
elaborate and send you some other things to check out too. Love to do that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, Katie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode.
Same. Have a great day.
You too.